If I were to try and describe Berserk to a stranger in as few words as possible, I would say this. Imagine every kind of human suffering you can. All those and more you will find here. Over the course of the story, every character, from the smallest to the largest, goes through hell. Their own bespoke, beautifully constructed hell that is true to their character and their place in the larger world. Feelings of inadequacy and regret, loss of innocence, dark temptations and obsessions, frustration at an unfair universe, the numbing pain of duty and servitude, the loss of everything that keeps you safe from the world around you, the restless desire to find approval and success, the damage caused by betrayal. This brief description of the story and the characters may lead you to believe that this is a world and story without hope for the future. But Kentaro Miura was not a nihilistic man. His work doesn't just show the hell our characters go through, it also shows the purgatory and the struggle that allows them to free themselves from it. Sadly, due to his passing earlier this year, some of our favourite characters may never see the end of their purgatory, just as we may not see the end of our own struggles for redemption and inner peace. Except for one. The world of Berserk is full of demons and monsters, but what about when the demon lives inside you? What about the demons that have been there so long, you can no longer tell the difference between you and them? Today, I want to talk about one character who, after many trials and emotional upheavals, did manage to escape her inner beast of darkness and rise above it, unrecognisable from who she was before. The commander of the Holy Iron Chain Knights, last daughter of the Vandermond family, Farnese. But hold on, you say, gentle viewer. Guts has his beast of darkness, yes, we see it all the time, but Farneses is never shown to us, right? That's because it was there the whole time, right in front of us in plain sight. And its name? Borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder is characterized by the DSM-5 as follows: chronic feelings of emptiness, emotional instability in reaction to normal events, intense fear of abandonment or loss, a persistently unstable identity, impulsive and risky behavior, intense emotion that is difficult to control, interpersonal relationships that are characterized by splitting or an extreme swing between idealization and complete devaluation, recurrent suicidal or self-harming behavior, and stress-related paranoia or even dissociation. If you have over 5 of these symptoms, you might find yourself diagnosed with BPD if you end up seeking help for mental illness. If the world of Berserk contained anything like a psychiatrist, Farneses' notes would probably look like this: emptiness, check; emotional instability, check; fear of abandonment, check; unstable identity, check; impulsive, check; intense emotion that's difficult to control, check; self-harm, check; interpersonal relationships characterized by splitting, oh boy, all the checks; stress-related paranoia, well, it's Berserk, so the paranoia is probably justified, but yeah, there's a bit of that in there too. This cold, diagnostic picture of BPD might be scientifically accurate, but to me it has always lacked something. It conveys what you see, but it doesn't convey who the person you're looking at actually is. Even the name of the diagnosis irks me. Borderline personality disorder? To me, it sounds like it's casting blame on the person themselves, on their personality being defective somehow. And that's not really the case. A personality disorder is not something that's wrong with you. It's a reaction to something that was done to you. As I say a lot on this channel, people are stories. And the story of BPD usually begins with tragedy, betrayal, and abuse. Abuse has many forms, and one day I'd like to make a more in-depth video looking at those forms and the different reactions people have to them. For now, just be aware that if you meet someone with BPD, chances are they've been through some shit. But that's not what makes BPD unique. The cruel twist is that whatever shit they went through, they wound up believing that they deserved it. Whatever the shit itself was, it caused you to see yourself as bad, wrong, evil, or damaged in some way. I spent a lot of time struggling to understand self-harming behaviour. It's a common coping strategy of people with BPD, especially in locked units where a lot of other forms of coping are limited. But to me, it makes no sense. Why would you want to experience pain? When someone else tries to hurt you, you avoid it or prevent it, right? So why are you doing it to yourself? Why would you hurt something that you like? Oh. The self-critical part of your mind can be cruel to you, and living with BPD is to struggle against that part of you constantly, to keep it from destroying your sense of self-worth. Sometimes this can be so overwhelming that self-harm almost seems like a rational escape from it. I should clarify that desire to self-harm is not a conscious part of the process. The pain is not the point. The point is to distract yourself from your emotions with the pain. And self-hatred just allows you to go against your instincts to avoid the pain entirely. Realizing the internal struggle makes a lot of the extreme expressions of behavior associated with BPD very understandable. Of course you hurt yourself and push people away, lash out and regret it. You think you deserve it, even though, and I cannot stress this enough, you don't. So what happened to Farnese? What was it about her life that caused her to act the way she does when we first meet her? What was done to her, and why does she think that she deserved it? When discussing abuse, it's tempting to draw up comparisons between people's stories. Fans of Berserk might look at the abuse that Guts experiences and say, well, Farnese grew up rich. Both her parents are still alive, she was given everything she could have ever wanted. What could she possibly be sad about? Here's the thing about suffering. It's relative. Farnese was not a child soldier, she wasn't physically abused by her father or sexually assaulted by anyone, unlike most of the other women in Berserk. What she was neglected. Neglect is a special kind of abuse. Abuse not of targeted, focused, painful memories, but of indifference, a long, slow, drawn-out process of nothing. Just as by action can a person be hurt, so can they by inaction. For those who have never experienced it, let me try and describe it to you. Imagine yourself when you were at school. You achieve something extraordinary. You get perfect marks on your final test, you write a great song, you just make a banging lasagna. You bring it to your parents, your big sister, and your best friend, whoever you most respect in this world, and their response is, and? So what? It would hurt, right? Now imagine that all the time. What would a learning, thinking being do in that situation? Try the opposite. And then you get punished, so clearly that's not the secret to getting what you want either. That despair, that feeling of whatever you do not mattering, is just as much abuse as anything Gambino ever did to Guts. Farnese, as a young girl, did everything that was asked of her, and received nothing for it. For years, that was her norm. As a learning, thinking child, trapped alone, surrounded by servants who had no interest in her, and ignored by the one man whose affection she wanted, her father, Farnese came to the conclusion that nothing she did had any meaning or bearing on the world around her. That is, until one day, a heretic burning occurs just outside her window. Curious, she goes to see what's happening, and an adult man offers her a torch and instructs her to burn the heretic at the stake. She does, and in return for maybe the first time in her life, she receives love, admiration, respect, a smile, and off she goes. Finally, she is seen. She exists. A neglected person, especially a child, will grasp any sort of intimacy, connection, or even shallow attention that they can find. Farnese is no different. A common misinterpretation of Farnese is that she's a pyrophiliac, someone who takes sexual pleasure from the sight of fire and people on fire. That's certainly what Miura seems to be telling you, but it's not exactly what's happening. She's not just sexually attracted to fire, she's a pyro-romantic. That warm feeling in her belly, it wasn't lust, it was love, intimacy. Probably the first time she had felt either of those. Thus, the Pavlovian association is made permanently, seared into her brain like the brand seared into Guts' neck. Pain connected to love. This explains her otherwise disturbing relationship with Serpico. Serpico is a poor boy who was raised by a semi-delusional mother to revere and seek access to nobility, and in seeking a way out of the gutter, he is forced to accept Farnese as his master. Their relationship at first is purely abusive. Serpico is praised by the other servants of the manor purely for being able to withstand the pain of her wild behaviour, and her controlling nature and attitude that she learned from her father. But to Farnese, pain is love. It is affection, the only kind she knows, and keeping him under her strict control is the only way that she's ever learned to keep someone from leaving her, to avoid the fear of Serpico abandoning her. Serpico is a fascinating character by himself and deserves his own video at some point, but his impact on Farnese cannot be ignored. As she says, they both grow up bent, but bent together. When Farnese finds out that her neglectful father is planning to marry her off to whoever is willing to take her, she interprets it correctly as an attempt to abandon her, confirming all the beliefs she's ever had about herself up to that point, that she means nothing. In a moment of pain and vulnerability, she turns to Serpico, the only person in her life that doesn't hate her, and has proved that by remaining at her side. Yes, she has inflicted great pain upon him, but to her, that's why she loves him. She hurt him, and yet he is still here. She feels safe being vulnerable and even romantic towards him, and begs him with her body to deflower her and save her from this feeling of abandonment. Serpico, knowing that he is in fact her half-brother, hesitates, and that momentary hesitation is enough to cause Farnese to go into a crisis. I mentioned splitting earlier, and here it is again. Splitting is an intense emotional swing in a personal relationship between viewing someone as the purest good and the most heinous evil. Just as she burned her pets when they wouldn't behave, so does she burn her feelings for Serpico when he doesn't immediately accept her offer of intimacy. Unwilling to be abandoned though, she sets fire to her father's mansion and dances gleefully among the flames, reminded of the time when she burned people alive and finally got the love and attention her father denied her. An extreme action to combat fear, a fear of abandonment. Aggression is a response to threat, after all. This is an important plot point. Out of her fear of being abandoned, Farnese acts in a way that pushes her father away for good. He abandons her, but this time not to a husband. He sends her away to a convent to learn how to control her actions. He even calls her Devil Child. This begins the next phase of Farnese's life, a phase unfortunately we don't get to see, but it's a phase of control in an institution. Yeah, okay, it's a metaphor for being sectioned. There are ways to recover from BPD. Being locked up in a ward for long periods of time is not one of them. There are studies that show that partial hospitalisation staffed by people who know specialised therapies are pretty effective and they don't cost very much. The standard psychiatric care model, however, is a lot less effective and it takes a lot longer. Institutionalisation is not a way to change someone, only to teach them to control themselves and keep themselves safe. People with personality disorders rarely achieve full recovery inside the hospital system, and the tight constraints of a locked ward becoming a new normal can often make people feel a lot worse. The best you can hope for from a period in hospital is that they learn to control their outward behaviour by controlling the situation around them, learning to numb or avoid the emotions rather than confront them directly. And this is what we see from Farnese. While we see nothing of Farnese inside the convent, what we see is who emerges on the other side, a woman who exists in a comfortable bubble, dictated by religiosity and strict systems of control. She has a set view on how things should be, but an inability to cope with situations that threaten that view or take her by surprise. She is sent out as the commander of the Holy Iron Chain Knights to capture the biggest threat to that religion and her worldview, the prophesied Hawk of Darkness, known only as the Black Swordsman.
Damn. No.
Following the trail of destruction and lost children, see what I did there? She and her order eventually find him, weak from his incredible battle with the Apostle Rosine, and with some help from her loyal subordinates, mostly Serpico and Azan, she manages to achieve her goal. This is the first confrontation Farnese has with Guts, and thus the first challenge to the system of control that she has seen since her convent days. Remember, to Farnese, Guts is the Hawk of Darkness, a prophesized monster set to destroy everything she puts value in, the religion that keeps her emotions in check. The confrontation reveals something interesting. Guts, being more knowledgeable about the world than Farnese, and frankly not giving a fuck at this point, challenges Farnese directly, and with a few words, he manages to trigger Farnese with what she already knows. He, correctly, points out that she is hollow inside, numbed to her own emotions and feelings, hiding behind God, a symbol of her forcing her control over her own desires. In her distress and fear, she lashes out, attempting to torture Guts, losing control of herself in the process. In later scenes, we learn that the association between love and pain still burns deep within her. While she lashes out at Guts, she feels that warmth she felt as a girl, burning heretics and animals alike, her only experience of love. This is a part of BPD that institutions like hospitals, here represented by the convent, don't like to admit. While forcing someone into a box may control their behaviour, it cannot control what lies beneath the surface forever. When the bubble of security and comfort is broken, the raw emotion will always be there. Sometimes it'll explode outwards with very extreme consequences. This is another interesting moment, not just because of Farnese's outburst, but that Guts doesn't even flinch when she lashes out. To the audience, this is pretty understandable. Guts literally set himself on fire during the fight with Rosine a few chapters ago. Why would a whip even register at this point? Can he feel that? I don't even know. But from Farnese's perspective, she has no idea who Guts is. All she knows is that she lashed out and expressed her emotions openly, and he was still there, looking at her inquisitively. He doesn't regard her any differently or even try to punish her back like her father did. He simply stands there. Gently, she gets closer to him. This moment is easy to miss when it happens because before the art has time to settle in your brain, Azan bursts in to investigate. But don't worry, this will come back later. Later that night, with a little help from the comedic therapist that is Puck, Guts manages to escape and steal into Farnese's tent. What we see there is Farnese engaging in an act that was once called self-flagellation, a religious practice that involved punishing yourself to appease God and absolve you of your sins. Today we call this act self-harm, or deliberate self-injury for the scientifically minded folks. This is a significant moment in revealing what we later know about Farnese, but we'll come back to it in a minute. This is only the start of the most important night of her life.
And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, and a blasphemous name upon its head.
After knocking out both Farnese and an unlucky guard who raised the alarm, Guts takes her hostage and she wakes up half naked, tied up on a horse. Not your average Saturday night, but let's roll with it. The night in question becomes more and more not average as we go on. Farnese is confronted by the ghostly spirits of the dead, gets caught in the middle of a ring of possessed dogs, and lest we forget, the horse incident. Guts tells her that God is giving them a show, and the show that they get is the first crack in Farnese's stifling, controlled little bubble. By the sunrise, Farnese is scared, helpless, and traumatized, but thanks to Guts, alive. And throughout the whole night, for all her learned prayers and systems of control, she couldn't find a single one to keep her safe from this. The only thing that kept her alive was Guts, damaged and panting in the safety of the sunlight. Farnese knows she should hate him and fear him, but instead she finds the sight beautiful. With her comforting bubble cracking, a possessing spirit crawls up to her, taking her face and whispering in her ear what she already knows. She is lying to herself. Her time at the convent, her religion, her position of power and control, none of it fixed anything. Inside, she is still the devil child who burned animals and heretics and her father's home. Her facade will no longer keep her safe, not from this scary new world, and more to the point, won't keep her safe from these terrifying emotions that lurk and boil inside her. The Night of Miracles should really be called the Night of Metaphors. In the period between the sunset and the sunrise, Farnese's personality disorder is demonstrated through Mura making it a metaphor, and as usual making it viscerally extreme. Farnese is shown engaging in self-harm, from which she feels she's being punished but also gets a morbid satisfaction from. In real life, people who engage in self-harm feel something similar. The pain gives them a morbid clarity, the distraction from the emotion, and satisfies their belief that they deserve nothing else. Here we see the possessing spirit as a metaphor for intrusive thoughts. A common symptom of severe BPD is intrusive negative thoughts about yourself. They sometimes feel like voices in your head, but in reality, it's your own voice, your own self-critical mind talking to you. These are the feelings that you push back and repress constantly to prevent you from having a crisis. In the very next scene, a possessed Farnese attempts to sexually goad Guts into satisfying her lust and proving her thoughts correct by literally splitting her in two with his giant sword. This is a metaphor for the rash emotion-driven impulsivity that sometimes comes with BPD. The emotion gets so powerful and intense that they turn to extreme acts in order to quell it. While I'm not saying that all people with BPD want to grind themselves to death on a dragon slayer, the metaphor can also be seen as a suicide attempt, an act of self-harm, self-sabotage, or just impulsive thrill-seeking, all things that people with severe BPD have been known to engage in. Hell, even the rape horse is a metaphor here. After failing to pray to God, Farnese instead tries to control the situation with her authority. She orders the horse to let her mount him. Instead, the exact opposite happens. A demonstration of her control techniques backfiring as he just pulls the reverse card and is like, okay, what the fuck is wrong with me? Did I just seriously defend the rape horse scene from a psychological perspective? What am I doing with myself? Fuck. At any rate, the point is, the Night of Metaphors changes Farnese forever. A crack has emerged in her facade of nobility and religiosity. A crack that will only grow deeper and wider for the rest of the arc, even as she tries harder and harder to pull it back together. As she leaves, she promises that she will kill Guts and seal his lips forever. I don't think she actually expects him to tell anyone about what happened here, but him being alive is proof enough that it did. Farnese will try to repress that night in any way she can, even if it means killing a man who once saved her life. Guts, of course, is oblivious to what this night means for her, but Serpico is not. To get a read on Guts, he tests him before leaving, his eyes belying the fury of a protective sibling, who sees Farnese's loss of control as risky and unsafe. Guts allows him to leave with a gruff remark, but Puck, ever the therapist, just says,
"You know, she seemed kinda sad, that Farnese person. All bound up on all sides."
So here, Mura has fully constructed Farnese at the beginning of her recovery. A young woman full of the desire to be good and make her mark on the world, but crushed and distorted by years of neglect, isolation, and hatred of her own desires and feelings, manifesting into what we would call in the modern day, borderline personality disorder. The Holy See, which is basically just a metaphor for the controlling style of "just stop acting like this" psychiatry, made her believe for the longest time that she could repress the feelings and what she hated about herself and still do good by serving God, or rather, them. But this is falling away now, and it's been proven false by her own personal antichrist in a whirlwind of high emotion and trauma. So what can she do? Her persona and identity are cracking now. But as the story continues, as we will eventually see, no one is ever truly broken. You just need to figure out the right way to build yourself back up again. As any AA sponsor will tell you, relapse is a part of recovery. This is especially true early on in the process when you have no idea which situations to avoid and which methods just don't work. Relapsing, of course, is exactly what Farnese does after the Night of Miracles. After letting Guts slip through her fingers, Farnese is punished by the Holy See, dressed down and blamed personally for her failure to capture him. Farnese argues back, but the Council of the Faceless Authority silences her and shames her for losing so many men to Guts' blade. They also take pains to remind her in a very patriarchal way that her role, her title, are entirely ceremonial. They mean nothing, but she is expected to do it anyway. Hurting, but desperate to regain a feeling of control and stability in her life after the recent events, Farnese accepts the Council's orders and is sent to escort an important priest to the Tower of Conviction, a safe haven for refugees driven out of their homes and villages by the latest plague. The priest in question is well known as strict, devout, and aggressively dogmatic, a standard bearer for all the values of the Holy See and one of their most beloved servants, Father Mozgus. Mozgus, noticing right away Farnese's desire to be more devoted and her complete lack of objection to any of his more extreme methods, takes Farnese under his wing. And the two of them spend a lot of time together discussing the importance of their faith and the morality of what they do. Farnese is shown firsthand that the horrors that Mozgus and his misfit torturers unleash upon the poor souls in the refugee camp, and learns that the torturers themselves are following Mozgus not out of moral certainty or divine providence, but of personal fatherly connection that even they acknowledge is completely emotional. Farnese sees in Mozgus the epitome of the faith in action, the best her old systems of self-control have to offer, and what she sees is violent, cruel, unfair, and reeking of hypocrisy and selfish amorality. Even the small acts of good that Mozgus does in between beating people to death and breaking them on wheels proves to fail horribly. He took pity on the men society had cast out as monsters, only to make them into monsters himself. He took a baby from its mother's arms to give it food, but tortured her so badly that she lost her mind and didn't even notice her child was dead. Even when the system works, it hurts people. It happens gradually, but little by little, Farnese begins to question if what they're doing is right. Seeing the people starve, she wonders why her rich kid knights eat their fill every day. Seeing the extremes of the torture, she tries to look away, only to be ordered to stare straight into the abyss, proudly. Gently and somewhat fearfully, Farnese even puts it straight to Mozgus. "Father, do you think that all we're doing is sowing fear and impoverishing spirits?" The story he tells in reply, of a man dying with dignity because God demands that he reject help, is unsatisfying to say the least. You can even see the face she makes expecting him to go on, but nope, the man just died. "Off you go, child, and spread the joy of God." Farnese tries her best to do as he commands, she really does. She burns and hunts the heathens, she accepts all kinds of tortures must be done in the name of God. She even listens to the sermons of the mad priest who bashes his face flat into the floor every day. And yet, in the dead of night, when she's all alone, her desires to feel warmth and feel pleasure return to her. Staring into the flames, her heart racing from a day of hunting and burning heretics, in the privacy of her own room, where no one can see her, she succumbs. This image of Farnese alone and crying to herself whilst desperately trying to convince herself that she's right is the most solid proof, if it were needed, that Farnese's belief is failing her. Her emotions and her lusts are becoming too powerful for her crumbling belief to meaningfully control. She burns heretics, she even finds some genuine ones and engages them in righteous battle. But none of it is working anymore. She's carrying on her life not out of conviction, but out of inertia, out of habit. And just as this is going on, who should just happen to show up but... When Guts enters the picture, Farnese and her men immediately try to capture him, multiple times, but failing horribly. Unbeknownst to her, this is not the same Guts that she met before. Not only is he rested and impossible to beat in a fight, even for Serpico, he has a goal now, a purpose beyond killing demons for his own revenge. He's looking for Casker. That means all bets are officially off. By the bizarre twistings of causality, however, the Holy Iron Chain Knights, which I just realised can be shortened to Hicks, manage to get their hands on Casker, and Mozgus delights at the possibility of destroying her as a witch. Casker, of course, is not a witch, but she is under the protection of something just as powerful and frightening. The demon child rushes in to protect her, just as Mozgus attempts to put her into one of his many torture devices, and the resulting chaos and death leaves Farnese a wreck by the time Guts catches up to them. So much so that she can barely respond when he demands to know where Casker is. She shows him when he lets her go, but standing in the blood and bodies, terrified and flashing back to that night, she can only do one thing to stay alive: follow him. What they find when they get to Casker is a true horror show. Mozgus, having made into a monster for real, has captured Casker and intends to burn her for witchcraft personally. The ensuing fight is an epic, impossibly well-drawn and dramatically perfect struggle between Guts and the newly crowned angels of the Holy See, and as the final battle with Mozgus unfolds, Farnese realises who she's been following this whole time. These aren't angels. They're beasts that preach obedience and conformity. As Guts throws down Mozgus and the tidal wave of flesh-eating spirits rushes up at them, Farnese can only stare, dumbfounded at Guts. How can he be so calm? How can he know what to do? How does he know we can survive? Guts himself, unknowingly, gives a line here that not only saves her from freezing in the face of despair, but serves as a mission statement for Farnese's entire process of recovery.
If you don't want to die, make yourself useful.
She does, and they survive the birthing ceremony, if only just. Farnese's faith in her system of control, however, is not. This is her rock bottom. She has nothing left. No men, no system of control, no faith to guide her. The only thing left is her. In the wreckage and beautifully drawn carnage of the rebirth, Guts and Casker escape on horseback, and Farnese is left behind with a choice. She takes the blue pill. She goes to the Holy See, accepts her punishment, and returns to her isolation. The past she knows well enough to know it offers no hope or comfort. She takes the red pill. She follows a black swordsman, and learns the truth about the world, its dark secrets, but possibly learn how to survive them, calm, and be confident in the face of fear, like Guts is. Does she avoid her fear, or confront it? This moment is significant because it marks the first time in her adult life when Farnese actually takes charge of it. She was sent to the monastery, she was appointed commander, she was ordered to capture Guts and to go to the tower. This time, she chooses for herself. She chooses to face what she is afraid of, and vows to herself to overcome it. By the time she catches up to him, Guts in her mind is split completely the other way due to his actions in the tower. He is no longer the purest of evil, but a paragon, a leader and an aspiration. She sees him as a way to beat her anxiety, her fear and her self-doubt, and is committed to following his lead whatever it takes. In another subtle stroke of brilliance, Miura here emulates a common false stereotype of BPD, but reverses it. In the public mind, cutting off your hair is a sign of a celebrity breakdown or characters at their lowest emotionally, when in reality it's a lot more complex. Here, Farnese cuts off her hair, not to show that she is in crisis, but to show a commitment to changing herself, an external change to mark the desire for an internal change, just the way a real person with BPD sometimes does. Guts reluctantly accepts her, but tells her bluntly that he's not her therapist. He isn't salvation, he isn't a hero, he's just guts. Idolizing him will not be the answer to her problems. He's right about that. Attaching yourself blindly to hero figures, however powerful it may feel, is not the road to recovery. What neither of them know is the person who will put her on the right track is right behind that tree. Travelling with Guts and Casker, two people who are cursed to be followed and haunted by spirits every night, is a humbling experience for Farnese. Although she tries her best every night to fight the monsters like the others, she botches it, and Guts sharply orders her to focus on Casker and keeping the fire lit. When she tries to be domestic and assist the group in that way, her lack of knowledge means clothes get ruined, and the party nearly eats poisonous mushrooms. Farnese has many conversations with herself about this. She had assumed before that simply following Guts and watching him as he carves his way through life would be enough to remove that empty feeling in her heart. But it isn't. This is less a feature of BPD itself, but a feature of all people who undergo long, difficult journeys. The wish for a magic bullet, an easy way out, for someone else to make you better instead of having to do all the complicated stuff of working it out on your own. She feels useless, unable to do anything right, even mundane things. All she can do is gather wood and babysit Casker. What Farnese does in this moment is critical. Instead of feeling slighted or enraged that her plan for recovery is not going as she hoped, she turns to Casker and does something the old Farnese would never have dreamed of. She apologises to her, even though Casker herself cannot offer her forgiveness, comfort, or even words in return. She apologises to make amends and confront her guilt, taking action to no longer ignore her negative emotions but confront them the only way that she can. Even if Casker doesn't understand this, the intent to make amends is the start of Farnese coming to find her own strength, her own identity within the group, her own purpose for surviving. And as they play in the fallen leaves, Farnese realises that it was because she felt so small, so powerless, that she sought to oppress others in the first place. This is a rudimentary outline of a DBT skill called behaviour chain analysis. The basic premise is that when you commit an act that hurts someone, hurts yourself, or causes you to lose control, as Farnese has been doing all over the previous arc, you take a step back and look at the practical, emotional reasoning behind that action. Then you take a step back further to look at the reasoning behind that reasoning. Okay, Farnese, so you made Serpico burn his mother. What happened just before that? He said mother, and the crowd started whispering. How were you feeling in your body at the time? I was shaking, and my eyes felt hot and watery. Where were you emotionally at that time? I was angry and scared. What thoughts went through your mind before you told him to throw the torch? I thought he was going to turn on me. I thought I had to test his loyalty. What made you think he would turn on you? Because everyone does. This is a rough idea of what a behaviour chain analysis for Farnese might sound like if conducted between two people. The point of a BCA, however, is not just to provide deeper understanding for the therapist, but to encourage this manner of problem solving in the person themselves. To encourage them to look at the story of their life and look for clues as to why they act and react the way they do. Someone with BPD can easily jump off this track if they're not used to it, slipping sideways into emotionally charged assumptions about other people or the world itself. This person did X to me because they hate me, obviously. This happened to me because the world is unfair and it hates me, obviously. Farnese has done this many times before in the past, but not here. She accepts that her feelings of smallness and uselessness were what drove her to commit violence in the first place, and endeavours not to let it happen again. The story hammers this home a moment later. In an impulsive attempt to be useful and find food, Farnese loses Casker in the woods and spends the night hurriedly searching for her, becoming lost in the dark and eventually cowering inside a tree until daybreak. After being found and realising Casker wandered back alone anyway, she reflects on this, thinking herself a burden, an albatross around the neck of the group. Serpico rather hurriedly encourages this sentiment and asks if she wants to go back to the Holy City almost immediately, here acting as the little voice inside our heads that always begs us to give up. But Farnese does not. She knows that going back is to confirm the negative thoughts she keeps having about herself and to succumb again to being small. However powerless she feels here, she confesses that at least now she is seeing herself clearly, and that honesty with yourself is always preferable to comforting delusions. This is a big step. By being honest with herself here, she learns from her failure to care for Casker, learns about herself, and learns that she can in fact take responsibility without suffering anything more than a stern look from Guts. The old Farnese had authority, power, control, but what she never felt was responsibility. She never panicked over losing her men, only failing her assignments and getting punished by God or rather the Holy See. The difference is that authority can be given, but responsibility has to be taken. The most powerful bond of Farnese's life begins here, and this bond is what drives her actions and decisions for the rest of the arc. Casker, helpless and unable to even speak, does what she did for Guts all those years ago, and what Serpico freely admits he could not and did not think to try with Farnese. Casker is vulnerable with her, and without judgment, lets her close. Simply by playing with her in the woods, Casker prompts Farnese to make amends, to try and understand her past actions and take responsibility for her actions going forward, even vowing to keep going after failing in so many ways. There is a tendency sometimes in people with BPD to relapse into old coping strategies, like Farnese did in the woods, cowering under cover and giving in to her fear. These relapses, like any relapses, can cause your motivation to improve yourself to collapse entirely. I call it the, well, it's ruined now, effect. Farnese, through honest self-reflection and accepting responsibility, does not lose her motivation. In fact, from here it grows stronger and stronger. As the story progresses, we see Casker becoming closer and closer to Farnese in every panel, and Farnese takes more and more joy in the responsibility she chose to take upon herself. It happens slowly in little moments, but by the time our party leaves Flora's mansion for the first time, caring for Casker has become a stable routine, and being the one that she trusts most has become an important and emotional aspect to her new identity. Slowly but surely, she finds her place in the group, a purpose. She has chosen to make herself useful, and she has. This is all background details and hints though. Farnese has not given up yet, but has she really changed? Can she yet overcome her fear, her anxiety, her feeling of uselessness? Is her new identity something she cares about, enough to overcome the toxicity of her old one? The old saying goes that you don't know your mettle until you are tested, truly tested. And the chaos of physical violence is one of the truest tests that there is. Upon their arrival at the small village of Enoch, the party is rejected out of hand by the village priest, but the crew elect to help anyway, when the village is suddenly raided by trolls. As the trolls pour into the village, Farnese gets her chance to confront the priest, and as though looking backwards in time, she sees herself in the old, stiff man, clinging to his religion and trying desperately to stop the intrepid young witch Shirke from saving the town with her forbidden magic, just as Farnese had once fought to stop Guts. Eventually the trolls climb onto the rooftop, and we get the first evidence of just how committed Farnese really is when it comes to protecting Casker. Farnese runs into the middle of the trolls without hesitation, grabs Casker and raises her blade. Eyes wide with fear? Yes, but she rushes in to protect her charge despite everything. How can a character who so recently was a mess of quaking fear in the face of these monsters suddenly risk it all for the sake of Casker? BPD is a complex thing, has a billion facets bespoke to each person who deals with it. You would think that someone who feels emotions like fear so strongly would run from a situation like this, right? Here's the thing. When you hate yourself and you love someone else, that fear might as well be non-existent. If you think you know for a fact that you are worthless and someone else is more worthy than you, what do? You put loving others above fearing for yourself. Farnese dives in and saves Casker not to feel like a hero by protecting a girl, but because to her, Casker matters more to the world, more to the group than she does. Losing Casker would mean the loss of someone Farnese cares for, and the loss of her purpose to keep going. Farnese stands her ground but is washed away with Casker in the fighting. After being caught and imprisoned by the trolls, confronted head-on with what they plan to do to them. It's Berserk, so naturally it's just over-the-top horrifying. Farnese steps up again, this time not on instinct, but out of choice. It's a dangerous situation that's flooding her with even more terror than before. She knows she should cower, hide, become small, but instead she fights back. She protects Casker and in the process commits to her new identity. She is the caretaker of Casker, and she is not going to lose that here. This is maybe the first time that Farnese has chosen to care unconditionally for someone else, and it's become her purpose, her reason for struggling against the world, but more importantly, struggling against her own weakness. In Klipoth, surrounded by trolls, and with Casker's warmth on her back, she finally wins. To me, this moment can be compared directly to the Night of Miracles. On both occasions, Farnese is scared, surrounded, out of her depth, and in a new world completely beyond her understanding, unable to realistically defend herself against any of it. On the Night of Miracles, Farnese gave in to her fear, cowering and unable to do anything, even pray, but here, because she's defending someone even more helpless than herself, she overcomes it and swings back despite knowing she is likely going to die. Even knowing that her silver shirt will not save her, having lost her knife, she still stands in the way of the fatal strike. She is afraid, but she does the right thing anyway. These two moments are reflections of an important part of the BPD recovery journey. It is one thing to be told that you're a good person. Whether it's by a therapist or a self-help mantra, at the end of the day, they are someone else's words, not yours. No matter how hard you try, you can't lie to yourself and be convinced. Farnese tried that for ages and it never made her happy. In order to shake an ironclad belief about yourself, you need to beat it by presenting ironclad proof, through actions, not just words. For Farnese, these moments are that proof. Yes, she can control her fear, she can protect something that matters to her, she can affect change in the world. She can do good. And finally, she can mean something. So, armed with the ability to self-reflect and proof that indeed she has changed and become stronger, what does Farnese do with her new secure self? What do we do with our new secure selves? The answer seems easy. Whatever we want, right? What Farnese wants, it seems, is to keep going, to walk alongside Guts, and throw whatever effort she can behind his newfound goal of healing Casker. She wants to learn magic from Shirke to understand the world even more. She isn't just eager, she's passionate about it. Finally, not only has she a way out, but a way forward. She wants to commit to this, and for a little while, we see Farnese as she wants to be. Confident, secure. But in Berserk, good things never last. Arriving in Vertanis and in need of a ship to travel on, Farnese faces something even more terrible than the trolls and Clip-Off. A force more powerful than the God Hand, a force bigger than nature and more harrowing than the unnatural. Her father. The most terrifying thing for any survivor of abuse, especially those with BPD, is having to face your abuser. It's an odd sensation. It's like an invisible hand reaching up your spine, grabbing your brain from the inside. All of a sudden, all those habits, those rote patterns of self-defense, of submission and giving up to this specific person, slip over you like a bodysuit and they twist you against their will. In this moment, all of Farnese's hard work and self-discovery seems to mean nothing. She might as well be a little girl again. All she can do is meekly agree with her father's demands and watch as he walks away, completely neglecting what she came here for. This is a thing that most people who've been abused by someone close to them can relate to. That impotent internal back and forth that comes with confronting them again. Confronting someone you thought you were past, you were sure you'd gotten over it, but you're still afraid of them. She feels useless, she feels she can't help her friends, she feels like she can never go against her family. She feels as though it's all a dream, a childhood fantasy to actually belong somewhere. Farnese quickly becomes paralysed. Her sense of uselessness leads to her being swept up in an arranged marriage, a future she'd rebelled against years before, just so she can get a ship. Wrapped up in that feeling of being useless, Farnese sacrifices herself, her future, just to be useful to her friends one more time. This may not seem at first glance like it has much to do with BPD, but let me explain. In the years I worked on wards, meeting a lot of people who struggle with BPD, I saw something beautiful in how they related to each other. They could be the most supportive friends you could ever want. They would always be there to talk to you, even if staff specifically asked them not to get involved. Sometimes it was honestly wonderful to see. The tragedy, of course, was that after helping everyone else in the ward with their problems, the people in question would have no energy or will to confront their own. They saw the pain of their friends as more important than helping themselves, often to their detriment. Meeting her father and brother and getting immediately swept up in a marriage plot, just after Farnese took such strides in caring for Casker, finding her strength and learning to desire her own power, to me, served to hold a mirror up to all the lessons she's learned. Self-sacrifice can be a good thing, but if you only care about others and not yourself, you might not see how much you mean to them, and you'll never truly understand who you are. Farnese has become stronger and kinder, but she believes that she only has value if she's helping others, allowing other people to choose her fate, because if it helps people, then it's fine, right? But right as her idiot brother Magnifico is about to exact his plans for her, the reality of the world comes back with a vengeance. A great magical tiger bursts in, maiming onlookers and nobles as they panic and try to escape. The greatest lords of the Holy See tremble and scatter in terror. No one has any idea what to do. Except Farnese, who stabs the tiger right in the eye with a candlestick and orders everyone to grab something silver if they want to live. This was the final test. Could Farnese still be useful by herself? Could she still conquer her fear without her friends behind her? Can she still protect others even when the others are people she doesn't even like? Even when one of them is her abuser? Of course she can. She's Farnese now, and Farnese has been in worse spots than this. She knows that, more importantly, she has proof that she really is a good person. No external forces are necessary for that. She's not useless or weak, even without her friends. Guts and the crew arrive just moments later looking for her, having never thought she was useless and not buying that it was really her decision to stop journeying. Symbolically, Shirkei gives Farnese some new magic of her own to fight with, and without much effort the nobles of the land are saved from the beasts, all of them dumbfounded, having no idea what to make of any of it. Farnese regards her crew, and finally comes to a realization. Her friends came back for her, even after she left them. When the smoke is cleared, Guts asks her, does she really want to stay here? And her response is, no, I just wanted to visit for a while. After all this time and all those struggles, Farnese is finally sure both of who she is and what she wants. And finally she feels complete. Farnese's journey from a scared girl to a mad tyrant to a brave hero is one of the most perfect yet grounded stories about conquering BPD I've ever read. It captures the highs, the lows, the grinding self-loathing, and the euphoric freedom when you finally, despite the pain, find out who you really are and become stronger for it. The burning question for all of us is how? How did she do it? She gave up her old way of thinking and became open-minded. She took responsibility and learned how to care for those around her. She was tested by the events of her life and found the proof that she could be a good person. She embraced her new role and found herself to be powerful even in times of dire crisis. She discovered people she could trust not to abandon her, even if she pushed them away. But I think the best way to sum it up, though, is a conversation she has with her absentee mother in the garden of her palace. Sometimes those who are the most familiar with pain can come to be kinder than anyone else. Farnese confronts her pain, becomes familiar with it, and uses it to become kinder than anyone else in the story. That kindness, both to others and to herself, gives back the agency that was taken from her, helps her find friends that she loves and trusts. It even empowers her to heal the trauma of others down the road, playing a key role in the healing of Casker's mind. Farnese's story is, of course, just that, a story. Can her experiences really be compared to ours in cold, boring reality? Not entirely. Not perfectly, and certainly not literally. Each of our stories is different, both in fiction and reality. But by understanding what she did, how she did it, and why she succeeded, maybe all of us, whether we have BPD or not, can take our pain, confront it, and turn it into something beautiful. And to me, there's nothing more beautiful or empowering than kindness.